Welcome to the empowering world of the Ladies Who Lead podcast, where brave souls share their remarkable journeys of venturing beyond their comfort zones to craft lives filled with passion and purpose. Megan Fuciarelli coded on the operating table, and she says her deceased grandfather told her, "You're not ready." She survived, found an even deeper sense of purpose, and today is determined to impact the world. She believes she's still here because her work isn't done. This is a leap you need to hear. This is Ladies Who Leap. Today's episode of Ladies Who Leap is brought to you by Pacific Business Partners. Pacific Business Partners helps women entrepreneurs replace the chaos of running a business with clarity, structure, and confident financial decisions. From bookkeeping and fractional CFO support to marketing strategy and operations, Pacific Business Partners build the systems that let you finally step out of the day-to-day and lead. Learn more at pacificbp.com or follow them on Instagram at Pacific Business Partners. Now, on to the show. Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining the Ladies Who Leap podcast. Today, I am so excited to welcome Megan Fuciarelli. I hope I'm pronouncing that right.
You are.
Thank you. Megan is a TEDx speaker, international best-selling author, and founder of US², I'm going to assume, thank you, Consulting, US² Consulting. Known as the Authenticity Amplifier, Megan helps leaders and organizations build cultures rooted in trust, authenticity, and meaningful inclusion. With more than a decade of experience in leadership development and culture transformation, Megan brings a practical and human-centered approach to every engagement. She is the creator of the CARES framework, which focuses on courage, acceptance, respect, and empathy as the foundation for lasting success. Megan is also the author of Wait.
Okay, we'll talk about that later, Lisa.
Metamorphosis Justice, from Savior to Changemaker, Stages of Justice Reform, where she introduces a transformative approach to leadership and social impact. Her work encourages individuals and organizations to move beyond performative efforts and into authentic, sustainable change. I wish I could have said it right, but I think you get an idea of what it is that her work on that book was all about, and we're going to talk more about it in a little bit because it seems extremely important, especially where we're at right now in our history of this country and everywhere in the world.
Right.
So welcome, Megan.
Thank you so much, Lisa. Glad to be here.
I'm very excited to get into what you do. So I like it because it's a different way of training or enabling leaders to transform their business environment. So it's very different, I think, of an approach, and I'm excited to talk to you about that. But this is about Ladies Who Leap. And so we do start by talking about your childhood. And is there any one or any experience that you had that really gives you gave you an incentive on what you're focusing on today?
So it's actually interesting. It's actually quite the opposite. So when I think back to my childhood, I grew up in a city in Michigan called White Lake. And if you're not familiar with it, it's exactly as it sounds. Really, all that was there was a lot of lakes and a lot of white people. So I say that kind of in just making a little bit of fun. And it's very true. And I did not have any diversity surrounding me. I did not have any experience outside of my bubble because I also grew up relatively poor or with less than enough resources. We didn't travel. We didn't have the ability to do so. Not only do we not have the money, but my dad worked so hard on the line at Ford, like so many families here in the automotive capital. And it was difficult because I thought I had this great, vibrant childhood, and I did. And when I went off to college, my freshman year, I was placed in the international dorm. And I didn't really know why I was, and I was a little bit nervous. And then I got my roommate assignment, and I was assigned a roommate from Russia. Now, I'm not sure if everyone can kind of tell, but I'm a little bit older, not elderly, but I'm older. I went to college right after the USSR dismantled. So going in, having a roommate from Russia, all I see on the news is all of the images of Mikhail Gorbachev and all these stereotypes and these stories that I hadn't personally experienced, but I heard. So it influenced the way I was thinking. So I was scared. I remember going into college, moving in, smelling all of these different smells that I hadn't smelled before, hearing all of these different languages and voices and songs and music that I hadn't heard. And I had two options. I could either go back home, transfer to a different school, which I have to say was something I very strongly considered because I was so scared, or I could lean in. And as scary as it was, and as hard as it was, I leaned in. And I'm so grateful to this day that I did. And I made a lot of mistakes along the way. I had the best of intentions. And even though I had the best of intentions, I made a lot of comments that were hurtful. And I think that's important to share because I think so many people have the best of intentions. They say things that they think are meant to be very positive and they're harmful. They invalidate people, they minimize people and people's experiences. And I had a college professor that really just took me under her wing. She was from South Africa, and she saw that my intentions weren't matching my impact, and she wanted me to help bridge that gap. And she was an amazing force in the work I did. And I went into education, spent my first chapter of life, my first career was in education. I retired as a school superintendent. But that experience propelled me into looking at the world differently and realizing that there were so many perspectives in the world that people were not able to experience or see or even have knowledge that it was there. They were oblivious to the world around them, not because they were purposely omitting it, but they were oblivious because they hadn't experienced it.
Oh my gosh. That's such a really, it's a telling story because I've
Mhm.
always said, and I've lived on the East Coast and the West Coast, so we were much more diverse. And I was not, I mean, I came from an Italian family, but there was some diversity in my little town in Connecticut. But I always looked at the South being a place where people couldn't afford to travel, so they don't see other cultures, so they're afraid. So there's the fears of things fear of the unknown, people you don't understand. You came from, I guess, the Michigan area, right? Up north.
Midwest. I grew up in Michigan, spent most of my career in Chicago, but I grew up in Michigan, the Midwest.
Yeah. And then, but you were actually conscious enough, I guess, to say your consciousness was enough to know, I really need to learn more about this. And then when you got into teaching, my gosh, that must have really carried forward in how you conducted yourself in an educational environment, right?
Yeah, what was really interesting about that is I was taught a lot of untruths, right? I was taught a lot of misinformation in school. And when I first found out that they were untruths, I was very angry. And then I realized, because I didn't realize until probably my late 20s, which I had already been teaching for close to a decade at that point, 7 or 8 years. And I realized that I was actually teaching untruths myself because you can't teach what you were not taught yourself, right? So I was taught that Columbus was the hero that discovered America, right? I was taught that Thanksgiving was a joyous celebration where we came and saved the what we called Indians, not Native Americans, right? That's what I was taught. And I remember I taught second grade when I first got out of college. I remember teaching my second graders and having a Thanksgiving celebration feast. And I had half of the students wear an Indian headdress and half of the students wear a pilgrim hat. And I remember thinking, oh, this is so much fun. This is such a cool experience for our students. But what I was doing was perpetuating the stereotypes and the untruths. So
Mhm.
when I first read, it was Lies My Teacher Told Me. And I think it had been around for a while when I read it. But when I first read it, I was angry. And then I started to feel ashamed and guilty because I fell into that same trap. I was a teacher that was lying to my students unknowingly, but I was,
Yeah.
right? And that was another wake up call for me. Intentions don't equal impact. And then having to go through all of those stages, but that's what sparked my own goal and passion of I need to make sure that the students I teach, I ended up teaching in the same district I went to school in for the first couple of years. And I
Wow.
wanted to make sure that the students I taught were not going to have the same experience I had. And my experience wasn't bad. It was great. It was very sheltered and it was very one-sided. And I wanted to make sure my students had other perspectives outside of that.
Let me tell you, you want to talk about a leap. That was a courageous leap because especially many years ago when you were just entering into the teaching realm, there were probably some critics and some people, even maybe teachers, that had a little bit to say about what you were doing. Can you talk a little bit about that type of experience? I can tell by the look on your face.
Oh my gosh. I remember the first time I started calling it Indigenous Americans Day instead of Thanksgiving. And I said, you can have both, right? I want to make sure we talk about the amazing attributes and accolades of our Indigenous Native Americans. And I remember parents being like, what? And then I would say, okay, why do we have Columbus Day off? I remember when I first went into administration and we were talking about the school calendar. I said, why do we have Columbus Day off? Why are we honoring and celebrating the history of someone? And then I also had to look at, okay, well, there are some people who still honor and idolize, and that's okay. Just like we saw 5, 6 years ago, we saw a lot of monuments across the country be taken down. And I saw people upset, and I said, that is okay. And we need to honor both sides of the spectrum, right? We need to honor people who say, take those monuments down. And we need to honor people who say, that monument is important to my lived experience. See, my work isn't about one extreme or the other. It's about hearing everyone and saying, how can we come together to honor everyone's lived experiences, knowing that our ancestors might have done things. What we can control is what we do in today's current age and how we raise the next generation and the legacy we leave.
I swear I'm gonna take what you just said, that last sentence, and blast it all over the description because that is so important. It is how we interpret and understand our past and how we move forward with that
Yeah.
understanding. Oh my gosh, that's so important. Okay, let's get into, first of all, the book that is already out, and I'm going to let you say the name of it because I am butchered it in the beginning.
No, that's perfect. Actually, I have them both here, but the first one is this one here, which is Metamorphosis. And it's a juxtaposition of the words metamorphosis and justice. And the reason why that word, and I actually trademarked it, it's registered now, but I trademarked it and I came up with that word because what we need to do as a society, not just in the US, but globally, is we need to think of justice transformation as the life cycle of a butterfly. And what I mean by that is we are all caterpillars when we start out in this world. We have to depend on other people. We're very low to the ground. We don't have a lot of perspective because we're so small. We're in a world that is chosen for us, right? As children, we live with whoever is providing for us. We live in an environment that is surrounding us, and we don't have the ability to just move wherever we want. We are at the whim of whatever those who are taking care of us, whether it's our parents, our grandparents, our family, the social system, whoever that is, we are at the whim of their decisions, right? And then once we are ready, whether it's to go off to college, to leave the nest, whatever that is, then we choose to, if we want, surround ourselves with a chrysalis, surround ourselves with that inner work. And that's the first piece. My name, Us Squared, understand self, unite society. We have to understand ourselves first. So when that caterpillar goes into a chrysalis, it gets messy. If you've ever happened to see the inside of a chrysalis before it emerges, it's kind of ugly and it's really, really messy. And there's a lot of stuff going on. But what emerges from that chrysalis is a butterfly. And that butterfly can never go back to being a caterpillar. But what that butterfly can do is fly above the world and gain a larger perspective, see the big picture. And then it can choose to go around and pollinate and spread whatever it is from one flower to the next or from one plant to the next. It's spreading pieces of itself, it's spreading its DNA everywhere it goes. And then it creates the next legacy. But as humans, we need to treat it like this. We need to stop doing a cycle that just keeps repeating itself because what we're dealing with right now in our global society can be referenced back to other things that have happened in our history. And until we actually change our behaviors, we will continue to be in a cycle instead of a true transformation. So that's why I coined the term of metamorphosis of we must truly transform and become part of that process of metamorphosis when we're talking about justice.
Wow. Now I know why you did a TEDx talk, because what you're saying is something that everyone should be saying from the mountaintops. It's almost like the news is just bad, just to get us to be hooked on watching the news. But what
Right.
you're talking about is really how we should transform ourselves as a culture, a worldwide culture. And
Mhm.
that is so important right now. And I do believe that kind of like all the muck is coming to the surface so that we can see how not doing that has affected everyone, so that change is real, like you call it, metamorphosis. Did
You got
I say it
it! Look at you!
right? Yay!
Now, I will say,
Metamorphosis.
once you start to say it correctly, you won't be able to say metamorphosis
Yeah, I
again.
know. I think
Because
it's
every
brilliant.
time I say metamorphosis now, I'm like, ooh, I'm glad I'm not teaching second grade anymore because we did a whole unit on the butterfly. I'm like, ooh, I'm glad I don't teach that anymore because I wouldn't be able to say metamorphosis.
But these are the things that should be talked about on
Yeah.
news, on TV, on podcasts like we're doing today. So I'm really glad that you were here. And they're in that book. Please get it, because she does talk to the 7 stages of social justice transformation, and that will be itemized, and you can read about that in that book. And that was your second book or your first book? We'll be right back. This episode is supported by Pacific Business Partners. Here's what I love about Angelica and her team: they don't just hand you a spreadsheet and walk away. Their fractional CFO service is for the founder who's outgrown DIY but isn't ready to hire a full time finance leader. Monthly strategy calls, cash flow forecasting, pricing analysis, and someone in your corner helping you make the big decisions with real numbers behind them. If you're scaling, planning a launch, or just tired of guessing what the data is telling you, visit pacificbp.com. Now, back to the show.
That was my first one. My
Okay.
second one is Look Into My Eyes, the intersectionality of identity.
Mhm.
And this talks about both visible and invisible identities, as well as chosen identities and given identities. And then also what societal identities are given to us and what we choose for ourselves.
Wow. So my work is working with women over 40 that have been given identities their whole life, and they don't know what their true identity is. And my work is to clear the negative thoughts that are blocking you from having your true identity. I've even identified 7 identity voids that women have so that they can better understand themselves, and so that it can help to where you go, right? You just said it several times. We have to understand ourselves in order to know where we're going. So it's right in line. I think I'm going to be buying that book because it's right in line with what I do for women, and it is so true that society gives us roles, and when those roles, when your kids, let's say, move out of their house, you're an empty nester, you've identified as their mother and their keeper and their caregiver. What happens when they're gone? You're always going to be a mom. They're always going to need your help. But what
Right.
happens when they're actually out of the house, and who are you? And a woman is sitting there going, "Okay, I need to figure out what my true identity is." Yeah.
Yeah. Instead of always being so and so's mom, what about just being yourself?
Yeah.
And I mean, my favorite title is mom. Absolutely. And knowing that my son will be leaving for college and continuing to become the human that he is and the amazing human he is, I also know that I am a whole person. I was a whole person before him. I became a better person after him. But I'm always the same human, and we are all whole. And I say this often, we were cast, everyone, women, everyone, were cast in a role that we didn't necessarily try out for. And now it's up to us to determine, are we going to go ahead and go to callbacks and take on that role? Or are we going to create a new role for us?
Oh, I love that. Love that. Very nice metaphor on that. You have a new book coming out. that's going to be in March of 2027. So evidently, every year you release a book in March, just so when
On
people
March 13th.
March 13th, very specific, 2027. It
Yes.
includes what you call the AWE process. Can you give us a sneak peek? Talk about what that process is. I know it has to do with authenticity. Yeah.
It does. So it's actually, if you think of AWE, it spells out awe, right? So it's shock and awe, transforming culture shock into awe, some opportunities. So it's about taking that moment, like I explained earlier, when I was going off to college and being placed in this space where I either had to go back to what I thought would be safety and allow fear to control me, or if I was going to lean into that discomfort, right? Become aware of what gaps existed in my own understanding of the world, and then fill those gaps, right? The awareness is filling up, is identifying those gaps. The second phase is wisdom, filling in those gaps, learning more, understanding different perspectives, gathering not just quantitative data, but qualitative data. And then the third of empowerment is taking that information and doing something with it. Because I think as adults, we gather so much information, right? Whether it's listening to a podcast, reading a book, watching something on TV, we gather so much data and information, but that data and information is lost if we don't do anything with it. So our goal is to empower not only ourselves, but others around us to be able to have additional perspective, to be able to move through the world.
And
So it's
I'll say,
awareness, wisdom, and empowerment.
and it's not easy. I mean,
No,
actually taking the information that you've been given and siphoning off what is good information and what isn't necessarily good information, and really and you call it the authenticity amplifier, and amplifying that out into the world with your own creativity, your own way of doing, sometimes isn't easy. So,
no,
no. So you've written all these books. You have your Us Squared. So that's at your actual company, and you work with companies. Am I correct?
correct.
Okay. And when
Yes.
you started that company, getting out of education, it was a leap. Where
Mm.
did you get the courage to do that? How did that all happen? And we'll be right back. What if the life you're dreaming of doesn't require becoming someone new, but finally becoming you? At Ladies Who Leap Coaching, I help women discover their confidence, purpose, and authentic identity using my Identity Bloom method. And I have changed many women's lives, and some men's lives too, to a place of self love and self trust. Join my Identity Bloom Circle group program at a low cost point and start growing into the life you were meant to live. You can find it on my website at ladieswholeap.com, because your next leap begins with you. Now back to the show.
I wish I could say that I made it happen. I did. However, I believe the universe helped me do that. And what I mean by that is when I first started doing this work, when I was in Illinois, I had enough years vested in the system to retire from the Illinois retirement system for teachers. So at that point, I said, okay, my parents are getting older. They weren't healthy, but they also weren't like unhealthy. They just weren't healthy, I guess I would say, in that middle, right? And my son was getting ready to go off to kindergarten. And I said, okay, well, I can go back to Michigan to be close to my family. I did a lot of values work myself and said, my most important thing right now in my life are my family. And the best way that I can honor that is to be close to my family. So I made the decision to move back to Michigan. And when I did that, I could have gone back into the school system. A lot of educators go ahead and do 2, 3 states for retirement because you're able to do that. And I said, no, I came back to be with family. So I wanted to do something that followed my passion. And I thought, okay, well, I'll do this work. I'll just work with school systems. I thought at that point I would own my job, is what I really thought. I thought I would work with maybe a couple schools a year, do some training, maybe some coaching. I mean, I had been in a principal role, I'd been a superintendent. I thought I could just do that. And within the first year, I had 7 employees on my team. I had no intention of building a business. I had an intention of impacting the world and being the change that we needed in the world. That's what my impact was. That's what my purpose was. Within the first year, we had 7 employees. We actually this week celebrated our 10-year anniversary for the company. And at one point, we had 43 employees serving clients globally. And I remember even now to this day, I will go to a family reunion or I'll go to a family function, maybe a wedding, something that I don't see people all the time, but some of my family. And they will ask me, "Did you find a job yet?" They still think that I'm unemployed. And I will say, I, I don't understand. I'm a single parent. I have a home. I take my family on vacation. It's not just up the street. Like we've gone to Italy and Ireland and a houseboat in Florida. We're taking an Alaskan cruise this year. We do nice things, and that's important to me to build those memories. It's always so funny to me though that I still have people who think I'm unemployed, and I wonder, how do you think I pay for these trips? Like, do they think I won the lottery on the side? Do they think I'm like hustling up? I don't know what they think. But it was a huge leap because I left a title that society said, "Ooh, Megan, you're successful because you're a superintendent." And I left that. And for the first 2 years, I even fell into, well, what do I say I do? Right? When people say, "What do you do?" Because that's often the first thing they ask you, like networking events, even when you meet people socially. "Oh, what do you do for work?" "I'm a consultant." "Okay, about what?" "I'm an author." "Oh, what do you write? Has it been published?" Like, there's so many different ways to say it. And finally, I just said, "I changed the world." Because it's not about our title, right? And it was a leap for me because I left a very stable income, being a single parent, not receiving child support, not having anything else. I made the leap not only to move back to Michigan, where I had not lived for 20 years, to move back here and to leave a very nice position with a title and status and funding. And I left all of that. I didn't have clients when I first started. I remember sitting on my living room floor. I just typed out a whole bunch of letters and stuffing envelopes. Like that was my first way of marketing. And I'm blown away and humbled by what we've been able to accomplish, remembering where we started.
Wow. I'm humbled just listening to your story. I mean, and if it, I hope that whoever is listening right now is inspired by the fact that you were able to do this and accomplish this, and that your goal, your intention really is what I should say. I love that word much better than goal, but your intention
Absolutely.
is to save the world and to have an
Mhm.
impact on the world. Um, can you give us an example, like a story of a client or a company that you worked with that you helped to transform them? You helped to facilitate the transformation of that company and how they treat their employees, maybe even their customers.
Yeah, so the one story that I think of right away when you ask that question is we worked with a large pharmaceutical company, and it was right during COVID. It was the fall of 2020, and there was a lot of press around who was dying from COVID and the disproportionality and the access. And there were a lot of conversations around that. And it started to bubble into the workforce as well. And they had people who were creating the medicine, right? In the warehouse, in the factories, creating the medicine. And then you had leadership. And there was a strong divide, not only racially, but also in status of who was the manager level, who was the hourly level, salaried compared to hourly. And I remember when we walked in, it was extremely messy. And people didn't want to be there because they thought it was just lip service. And they thought, oh, well, they brought in this company. It's not actually going to change anything. And by the time we left, we worked with all 3,000 of their employees. We did quite a few trainings. We were in person. We did a couple virtual pieces. We did some coaching, but it was a year-long process. And after that year, the dynamics had changed tremendously. Before we started working with them, they had extreme turnover and they had a lot of complaints and a lot of lawsuits. When we left, they had decreased all of that more than 100%. It was absolutely, you would not have thought that when you looked at what success they had at the end, that they had come from where they had come from. And I think it's because we genuinely listened to everyone and we said, we're not here to change anyone's mind. We're not here to tell anyone that they're right or wrong. We're not here to blame anyone or guilt anyone or shame anyone. We're here to listen. And we're here to make a difference because all of us are here making these medications to make the world healthier and to make the world safer. We need to make sure we start here in the company to make sure our employees are healthier and safer, right? And so many frontline workers didn't feel valued during COVID. They were forced to go into work when everyone else was told, stay home, be safe. They were told, oh, your lives don't matter. You need to go to work. At least that's what was heard, right? And instead it was, you have the opportunity to save other people's lives. It's a different way of talking about it. It's not, we need you in because you're a frontline worker. It's, you have the amazing opportunity to save the lives of hundreds of thousands of people. Will you come in and help us save people's lives?
Wow. Talk about a reframe.
Mm-hmm.
That's huge. Absolutely huge. And thank you for doing that. And thank you to the C level, I'm sure, that made the decision to hire you
Absolutely.
because they have to take their own courageous leap to actually hire you and think, okay, I may be looked at kind of funny. I'm not sure if people are going to understand what we're doing, but at least they had the insight to know that you would be able to help them. And they realized and had the awareness to know that they needed the help in the first place. So
Right.
thank goodness for that, for that person hiring you and then for the work that you did. Wow.
Yes.
Um, so let's talk about it. You're talking about saving the world. Okay, so who saves you when you're having one of those bad days? I love asking the question of who do you go to when you're having a tough period in your life or a
Yeah.
difficult day?
Absolutely. And the one thing I will say is it's important to, my goal is to impact the world, not save the world, right? And I use that reframe because when we are trying to save anyone as a savior, when we're trying to save any of those pieces, and I actually talk about it in my first book, that when we are becoming that savior, right? Then we actually subconsciously sometimes believe that we're better than someone else, right? Because if we have the ability to save someone, then we think, whether consciously or unconsciously, that we are in a better position or that we are better. So I'm very careful about using the word of impact, right? And my goal is to impact the world, to make an impact. Yes, I believe that there have been times where I have tried to save. When I worked at an orphanage, I definitely had the savior mentality. And that's part of the stages I had to work through, right? And when I think about people in my life, I've definitely had people give me a hand up and definitely save me from myself. What I encourage people to do is yes, there are moments where you can save someone, save something, right? If you save a lifeguard saves someone who's drowning, they're in a better situation. They're not drowning, right? So absolutely that person who's drowning needs to be saved. Don't live in the savior mode, right? Don't live in that mode of constantly wanting to save someone else. Now, when we go to the idea of who's been there for me, honestly, my son, I talk a lot about postpartum. I had the exact opposite. So I experienced 4 miscarriages before having my son. I was told at the age of 19 I would never be able to have children, and I didn't take that as an answer. I didn't want to believe that to be true. And I went through a lot of treatments. I did a lot of work to do everything I could, even went through a significant, severe surgery in order to lose weight, to be able to help myself be able to have children. When I experienced those miscarriages, at first it was extremely difficult. I was extremely depressed. And when I was finally successful with having my child, with having my son, I remember looking at him the first time I held him, looking into his eyes and saying, okay, now I know why I was meant to wait for you.
Mm. And we skipped
And
over.
he's the
Oh, go
exact
ahead.
opposite of postpartum, right? He is, I became a happier person after he was brought into my life. And I don't ask him to save me. He's not my rock. He's not anything else. When I'm having a bad day, honestly, I just cuddle up with him and we watch TV or we cook together or we laugh. He is the reason why I do everything I do. And he's always been the reason, even before he was physically on this earth, because he's always been in my heart.
Mm. That's beautiful. My mom had three miscarriages. My brother and I were successful, the successful births, but she did have three miscarriages. So I thought of her as you were speaking and how difficult that was to go through. So the fact that you got through the four and then had him, I can totally understand that he is someone that you just, the joy of being with him gets you through those bad
Mhm.
days. Yeah.
Absolutely.
You kind of hinted a bit and we skipped over it because I just love talking about your work, but you did have a near death experience.
Mhm.
And that affected you in some profound way. Can you talk a bit about that?
Yeah, so I mentioned that I underwent a pretty significant surgery. At the age of 19, I was diagnosed with lupus. And with lupus, there's just a lot of factors that play in, and it often hinders your ability to have a successful full-term pregnancy, which is also impacted by weight. And I was extremely overweight as a child. After college, I did not gain the freshman 15. I gained the freshman 150. Um, I was morbidly obese. And after I was told I had lupus, I started getting treatment for that. And then I was engaged and I said, okay, we want to start a family. We want to try and do all of this. And I remember being told by my gynecologist, my OBGYN, that I probably would not be successful with having a child. And I said, well, what can I do? And she's like, you need to lose weight. And lupus is always going to be a factor for you. And I said, okay, well, I'm going to lose weight. And I had been trying for years with different diets and different diet changes and trying not to fall into the just be on a diet. So I decided to go through gastric bypass surgery. And the procedure I had done actually is no longer approved by the FDA. It was extremely drastic. I had three-quarters of my stomach removed and more than half of my intestine rerouted. So my food does not go through my entire intestine. And basically, what that does is it means that your nutrition, as well as the fat and calories, don't absorb in your system. So I remember being extremely morbidly obese. And then within a year and a half, I had gotten to the point of being underweight, like clinically underweight. But the biggest point of the surgery is I remember I went in for surgery. Everything seemed to be okay with surgery. I came home from the hospital and I had surgery about an hour and a half away from my home. I was actually in another state. I'm in the Detroit area and I had the surgery just in Ohio because that surgeon had worked on lupus patients before. So I thought, okay, I'm going to go to someone who really knows what they're doing. And he was a great surgeon. We all make mistakes. But I was in probably about a week after surgery, post surgery, and I had extreme abdomen pain. And I remember calling my dad and saying, Dad, it hurts so bad. I'm in pain. I don't know what's going on. I think I need to go to the hospital. And the doctor made it very clear if you do go to the hospital, you need to come to us. Like you can't go to any emergency room because this was in, I mean, early 2000s. It was still a newer procedure. Not everyone knew about it. Only certain doctors even knew what this was. They said, you have to come back to us if you have to go to the hospital. So I remember being in the car, and when I first called my dad, he had also had the surgery, and he said, "Oh, Megan, it's fine. Just push through it. You'll be fine. It's uncomfortable. You're fine." I said, "No, Dad, I really need to go." So he got in the car grudgingly. He was not happy, right? He got in the car. He's like, "Fine, we'll go." We go to the hospital. Takes us about an hour and a half. We get there, and the doctor rushed me into the emergency room. And after the surgery, he came out and said, "If you would have waited even 5 more minutes, your daughter wouldn't be here." And my dad at that point said, okay, well, I guess I'm going to trust you when you say you're not feeling well anymore. That was a point. But what happened in the emergency room, I remember I was taken back for surgery, and I don't remember actually going under, but I remember what I thought was waking up and seeing my grandfather in front of me. Now, my grandfather passed about 5 years before that, 4 or 5 years before that, and he was my favorite person in the world, not just my favorite grandparent, my favorite person in the world. And it was a sudden loss when we lost him. He had some heart problems, but he didn't tell the family. And I remember seeing him. I'm like, oh, Papa. And I went up to give him a hug and I just wanted to hug him. And he's like, oh, okay, well, Megan, you're not ready. I said, no, I want to go with you. I didn't know what was going on, but I remember saying, I'm going to go with you. I want to go with you. This is so great to see you again. And there was a bright light behind him. And he said, no, you can't come with me. And I remember saying, no, I'm coming, I'm coming. And then he turned me around and pushed me. And I realized after the fact that him pushing me was actually the paddles because I had coded on the table. That moment, because my grandfather was so much more than just a human in my life that was phenomenal. He had been the mayor of my city, of his city. He was a president of a very large bank. And I found out after he passed that he never graduated from high school. And he had done all of these things, and he purposely made everyone in our life promise not to tell me that he did not graduate high school until after he was gone, because he was the biggest advocate for me in school. He was always, you need to go to college, you need to do this, you need to get degrees, you need to do this. And he was so monumental to me because he did all of these great things, and he didn't even have a high school diploma. I mean, things were different then, right? In the 50s and 60s and 70s, you could do things without paper to back you. And I think we're getting back to that now in our current society. But there was a 20, 30-year gap there that if you didn't have a degree, you weren't going to get a job anywhere near what you wanted to do. Um, but yeah, that was very impactful for me.
So, do you realize now, as you're speaking, and I know you got emotional, so you're making me emotional, but did you realize that it's because you had a purpose? Your purpose
I
is what you're
do.
living through now. You needed to stay alive. You needed
I
to
truly
continue your
believe.
work. Yeah.
Yeah, I truly believe. I mean, I've gone through a lot of health issues. When I was diagnosed with lupus, not only was I told I would not be able to have children, I was told I would never live past the age of 40. I passed that quite a while ago. So I believe I'm still here because my work isn't done yet.
Mhm.
And I tell everyone, if I am gone tomorrow, that's okay because it means that my purpose here is done and I've already lived past my expiration date. So I'm okay with it. I've done so many things with my life, and I've had the amazing opportunity to meet so many amazing people and to bring an amazing human into the world that I'm okay. I'm at peace. And
Yeah.
that's what I love, helping everyone that we work with, whether it's someone who hears my TED Talk or someone who just I meet in the grocery store. I mean, I've had one of my very best relationships over the years was someone I met at the laundromat. And like it's just being who you are and allowing people you meet to be who they are. That's what the authenticity amplifier is all about. It's not about being authentic yourself. It's about embracing the authenticity of people around you.
Mm. That's really important. I love the work. I love what you're talking about. Love the basis of your books and your work and how you're impacting the world. You, Megan, are truly impacting the world, and you should be very proud of your work. So thank
Thank
you
you.
for explaining it to all of us. So in the end, I like to ask for your favorite quote, mantra, or positive affirmation so you can share it with the audience. What do you have today?
Yeah, so I know we moved my camera, but you can see a little bit of it up there.
Yeah.
Gandhi's quote of "Be the change you wish to see in the world"
Mm.
is, and I'll share a small story with it if I could.
Yes.
So my son, I know we talk about him a little bit, but I can never get tired of speaking about him. But for Mother's Day 10 years ago, he had gone with my mom to find a Mother's Day gift for me. And he happened to get this ring right here. And it's actually a butterfly, and it says, "Be the change in the world."
Say that one more time
And
because you cut out a little. I want to make sure everybody heard it.
be the change you wish to see in the world. And when he gave me the ring, he said, "Mommy, you're the change."
Mm.
And every Mother's Day since then, he has gotten me something with that quote on it, whether it's a planter or something. And it became, again, I feel like my son is almost prophetic in ways, but it became not only the quote has been something that our company has adopted and brought in, it has also become kind of the piece of metamorphosis, right? The butterfly. So the ring has butterflies. I was never against butterflies, but I also didn't really follow butterflies as much as I do now. And It didn't happen right away. It wasn't because of the ring, but I just believe that life has a way of showing you why things happen, sometimes years after the fact. It's so powerful when you can go back to the first thing. And to be able to say that the first time this quote was presented to me in this way was from my son. The first butterfly I was gifted was from my son. The work that I do is because of my son. Even before he was alive, I did this work for future generations.
Wow. Thank you for sharing that and that
Yeah.
story and the quote, because it is such a profoundly important quote, I think,
Mhm.
for everyone to live by.
Yeah.
Um, how can people reach you? Is there a website? And I'm going to put all the links to the books and everything in the description. So anyone who's listening or watching, look right in the description. We'll have all the links there. But what could you tell people to go find you and learn more about you and reach you?
Yeah. Absolutely. So it's pretty easy. There's two different ways. You can do the number 2 consulting.com or my first and last name, Megan Fuciarelli. That's also on social media. So LinkedIn, Facebook, Instagram, all the same handles as same as our website, us2consulting.com or at us2consulting and then meganfuciarelli.com or at Megan Fuciarelli.
Thank you so much. I feel really privileged. Excuse me, I can't speak. I feel really privileged to have you, having had you as a guest on my podcast, because I think you're one of those individuals who's really standing out on trying to help the world. And we need more people like you, Megan. We
Thank you,
really do.
Lisa.
So
It's been an
thank you for
honor.
what you do. Thank you.
Thank you.
And thank you to the people who are listening, because it is you listening that allows me to continue to do this work, and I really appreciate it. So, like, subscribe, follow, all that stuff, because I want to continue doing what I do and enlightening and highlighting people like Megan in this world. Thanks. Thanks, Megan.
Thank you, Lisa.
Thanks so much for listening or watching Ladies Who Leap. This episode was brought to you by Pacific Business Partners, helping women entrepreneurs build businesses with clarity, structure, and soul. If you're ready to take that next leap, learn more at pacificbp.com or follow at Pacific Business Partners on Instagram. And I'll see you in the next episode.